What if you could change the past? It's a question that has tempted thinkers, scientists, and storytellers for generations. The power to undo a single mistake, to witness a lost moment in history, it's the ultimate fantasy. But every fantasy casts a shadow, and this one whispers of consequences you can't possibly foresee. What if changing the past doesn't fix things? What if it shatters them? What if the timeline, once you pull at a single thread, unravels into something monstrous? There's a story, an urban legend from the 50s, about a man who appeared in the middle of a city street, his clothes decades out of style, his face a mask of pure terror. He claimed he'd seen the future, and his words were a chilling warning to everyone. That anecdote, whether it's true or not, gets to the real fear at the heart of time travel. It's not about adventure, it's about a warning. Today, we're stepping into the darkness. We're going to explore the most unsettling legends about what happens when you mess with time. We'll investigate the alleged true accounts of people who slipped through the cracks of reality, and we'll dissect the fictional tales that became modern fables about the danger of playing God. These are not stories of triumph. They are dark legends of paradox, disappearance, and madness. So, let's explore 7 stories that will make you wonder if the past is better left untouched. Section 1. The Moberly-Jourdain Incident, a ghostly stroll through history. First up, we have a story that's less about deliberate meddling and more about an accidental and deeply creepy stumble through time. It's the tale of 2 British academics, Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, and a visit to the Palace of Versailles they would never forget. The date was August 10, 1901. Moberly and Jourdain, both respected scholars, were on holiday. They decided to visit the Petit Trianon, a small chateau on the Versailles grounds that once belonged to Queen Marie Antoinette. They set off on what should have been a pleasant, if maybe a little dull, walk. They had a guidebook, but somehow they took a wrong turn and found themselves on a path that felt strangely quiet. What happened next became one of the most famous time-slip accounts in history. The women described a sudden, oppressive feeling of gloom that washed over them. The bright, sunny gardens seemed to flatten, the colors fading as if they were looking at an old, worn tapestry. But it was the people they saw that made the experience truly bizarre. They encountered men they described as very dignified officials dressed in long, grayish-green coats with small, 3-cornered hats. They passed a rustic cottage where a woman and a girl stood in period dress, their features eerily static and unreal. The landscape itself seemed to have warped. They crossed a bridge that wasn't on their map and saw a pavilion that had been torn down over a century before. The feeling of unease intensified. Moberly later recalled seeing a lady sketching on the grass in an old-fashioned dress, convinced she was looking at Marie Antoinette herself, just as she appeared in portraits from the 1780s. Oddly, Jourdain didn't see this woman at all, an inconsistency that would later fuel a lot of skepticism. After their strange journey, they finally found their way back to a tour group and the 20th century. The oppressive atmosphere vanished as quickly as it had appeared. For a week, neither woman mentioned what happened, each probably thinking they had imagined it. But when they finally compared notes, they were stunned by how many strange, dreamlike details they both remembered. They spent the next decade obsessively researching the history of Versailles. They became convinced they hadn't seen ghosts, but had somehow slipped into the Queen's own memories of the grounds, memories tied to a day of immense dread. They theorized that the date of their visit, August 10th, was significant, connecting it to August 10th, 1792, when the royal family was imprisoned, a turning point that sealed Marie Antoinette's fate. They published their story in a 1911 book called An Adventure. Of course, there are more rational explanations. Psychologists have suggested it was a shared delusion, or folie à deux, where the strange atmosphere and their own expectations created a shared hallucination. Another compelling theory is that they simply stumbled upon an elaborate costume party thrown by the eccentric poet Robert de Montesquieu, who was known for hosting such events in the gardens. But whatever the explanation, the Moberly-Jourdain incident remains a cornerstone of time travel lore. It's a chilling reminder that the veil between then and now might be thinner than we think, and one wrong turn could leave you wandering through someone else's history. Section 2. Sergei Ponomarenko, the man who fell from 1958. Our next legend takes us from the gardens of France to the streets of a modern European capital. This is the story of Sergei Ponomarenko, a man who appeared out of thin air, clutching a camera from the past, and a story that defied all logic. The story goes that on April 23, 2006, police in Kiev, Ukraine, were called about a man acting lost and confused. He was dressed in an old-fashioned suit and looked to be in his late 20s. When officers asked him what was wrong, he asked for the date. When they told him it was 2006, he became deeply distressed, insisting he was from the year 1958. The man, Sergei Ponomarenko, was carrying what looked like an authentic Soviet-era passport. The only problem was, it listed his birth year as 1932, which would make him 74 years old, not the young man standing before them. He also had a vintage Yashima camera. He claimed that just moments earlier, he'd been taking photos in his hometown of Kiev in 1958, when he saw a strange bell-shaped object in the sky. He snapped a picture of it and then suddenly found himself in the future. The authorities, understandably, admitted him to a psychiatric clinic. There, a psychiatrist named Dr. Pablo Kutrikov took an interest in his case and, to check his story, had the film from Ponomarenko's camera developed. The film itself was a shock, a type that hadn't been produced since the 1970s, yet it was in perfect condition. The developed photos seemed to confirm everything. They showed images of 1950s Kiev, with buildings that no longer existed. There were photos of a young woman Sergei identified as his fiancée, Valentina, and photos of Sergei himself, wearing the exact clothes he was found in. The last photo on the roll was the bombshell, a clear image of a bell-shaped UFO hovering over a 1950s cityscape. The case kept getting weirder. Police supposedly found a file for a Sergei Ponomarenko, who was reported missing in the late 1950s. They even tracked down his fiancée, Valentina, now an elderly woman. She confirmed that her Sergei had disappeared, only to mysteriously reappear a few days later, before vanishing for good in the 1970s. She claimed that years after he vanished, she received a final cryptic photo in the mail. It allegedly showed an older Sergei in front of a futuristic Kiev skyline, with a note dated 2050, promising he would return. But the story doesn't end there. Back in the hospital, just a few days after he arrived, Sergei Ponomarenko walked into his room. Security cameras saw him go in, but he was never seen coming out. He had vanished as mysteriously as he appeared. It's a fantastic, chilling tale. Unfortunately, this is where the legend completely falls apart. The entire story of Sergei Ponomarenko is now widely known to be an elaborate hoax. It didn't come from police records or news reports, but from a Ukrainian science fiction TV show called Aliens. The photos, the documents, the psychiatrist, all of it was fabricated for the show. Even as a work of fiction, the legend persists online because it taps into a primal fear, being ripped from your own time, a castaway in the future. With no way home and no one to believe you, it's a story about the terror of being utterly alone, a ghost from a past that no longer exists. Section 3, Mike Madman, Markham, the man who chased a vortex. What if you could build a time machine in your backyard? What if you got so close you could see the portal, a shimmering vortex to another time? And what if, on your final experiment, you stepped through it and were never seen again? This is the dark legend of Mike Madman Markham, the amateur inventor who might have paid the ultimate price for his obsession. The story starts in 1995. Mike Markham was a 21-year-old electrical engineering student with a very specific goal. He wanted to build a time machine to get winning lottery numbers. He started with a device called a Jacob's ladder, which creates that classic lightning-like arc between two poles. Using a laser from a CD player, he modified it, hoping to create a stable electromagnetic field. During one test, he claimed to have generated a small circular heat haze, a vortex. To test it, he tossed a metal screw into the field. He swore it vanished for a few seconds before reappearing a few feet away. Convinced he was onto something, Markham decided he needed more power. A lot more. This led him to steal 6 massive transformers from a local power utility, causing a major blackout and landing him in jail. After his release, Markham's story went public. He became a guest on the late-night radio show, Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell, a hotspot for paranormal and conspiracy discussions. On the air, Markham, now dubbed Madman Markham, detailed his experiments and his plans to build a much bigger machine he could travel in himself. Listeners were captivated, sending him donations and support. In early 1997, Markham called the show one last time. He claimed his new machine was nearly ready. He was just 30 days away from testing it on himself. And then, nothing. Mike Markham was gone, his friends, his family, and the legion of radio listeners heard nothing. The warehouse where he was supposedly working was found empty. For years, his disappearance fueled wild speculation. Did he make it to the future, or did something go horribly wrong? One particularly dark story emerged when a listener called into Art Bell's show. They claimed to have found an obscure newspaper article from the 1930s about a man's body found on a California beach. The corpse was discovered inside a strange, crushed metal tube, and in his hand was a bizarre device that looked like a modern cell phone. The horrifying implication. Did Mike Markham's machine send him hurtling into the past, only for him to die a lonely, tragic death? Now, there is no credible evidence to support this. That 1930s newspaper article has never been found and is considered part of the urban legend. And years later, a man claiming to be Mike Markham did resurface, doing another radio interview and posting on online forums, stating he was alive and well. But the legend of Madman Markham persists because it's a modern-day Icarus tale. It's the story of a backyard genius who flew too close to the sun, a man who stared into a self-made vortex and may have been consumed by it. Whether he vanished into another time or just from the public eye, his story is a potent warning about unchecked ambition and the terrifying idea that when you open a door to another time, you might not be able to control where it leads. We're about halfway through our journey, and the stories only get more unsettling from here. We're moving from backyard inventors to government conspiracies and existential horror. If you're finding these tales as fascinating and chilling as I do, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next dive into the unknown. And let me know in the comments, which of these stories gets under your skin the most? I love digging through the comments to hear your theories. Now, let's get back to the darkness. Section 4. The Montauk Project, a conspiracy of lost children. What if the meddling isn't being done by lone inventors, but by a shadowy government agency with an unlimited budget? That brings us to our next legend, a conspiracy theory so dark and influential, it became the primary inspiration for Netflix's Stranger Things. This is the Montauk Project. The story centers on Camp Hero, a decommissioned Air Force station on the eastern tip of Long Island. According to the legend, deep beneath the abandoned radar tower, the U.S. government ran a secret underground facility. Here, from the 1970s through the early 80s, scientists were supposedly engaged in the most terrifying experiments imaginable: psychological warfare, mind control, and time travel. The legend was kicked into high gear by a man named Preston B. Nichols. In his 1992 book, The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time, he claimed to have recovered repressed memories of working as a scientist at the facility. Nichols and other so-called survivors painted a horrifying picture of what went on at Camp Hero. One of the most disturbing parts of the legend is the story of the Montauk Boys. The theory claims the project abducted thousands of homeless children and runaways to be used as psychic test subjects. Using powerful electromagnetic fields generated by the giant radar and a device called the Montauk chair, scientists would allegedly amplify the kids' psychic abilities, trying to weaponize them or even have them materialize objects out of thin air. As the story goes, the experiments grew more and more reckless, moving from mind control to teleportation, and finally, to opening a stable time tunnel. This allowed researchers to travel anywhere in history or space. But these experiments came at a horrific cost. Many of the children were said to have been driven insane, their minds and bodies shattered. The darkest rumors claim many of the Montauk Boys were simply lost in time, sent on one-way trips. Their existence wiped from the record. The legend's climax is pure chaos. On August 12, 1983, the project supposedly spiraled out of control when the time portal was linked to the infamous Philadelphia experiment of 1943. A monster from the subconscious of one of the psychics materialized and started destroying the base. The project was shut down in a panic, and some claimed the underground levels were filled with cement to entomb the horrors forever. Let's be really clear about this. The Montauk Project is a well-known conspiracy theory with absolutely no physical evidence to back it up. The entire story comes from the unverifiable and often contradictory accounts of a handful of people. Mainstream historians and scientists dismiss it as a work of fiction, a modern myth born from Cold War paranoia. Yet, the Montauk Project endures because it speaks to a deep fear of unaccountable power. It's a story about the government not as a protector, but as a predator willing to sacrifice the innocent to gain forbidden knowledge. The true horror isn't just about monsters and time tunnels. It's the chilling possibility of a system so secret it can erase a person not just from the present, but from history itself. Section 5. John Titor, the Prophet of a Digital Apocalypse. Back in 2000, as the world was just getting used to the internet, a figure emerged on online forums who would become the most famous time travel legend of the digital age. He called himself John Titor, and he claimed to be a soldier from the future, sent on a mission to save his world, and leaving a grim prophecy for ours. Posting on sites like the Time Travel Institute, Titor claimed he was an American soldier from the year 2036. His world, he said, was a shattered society recovering from a devastating World War III that killed nearly 3 billion people in 2015. This war was preceded by a second American Civil War that would kick off in 2004, tearing the country apart. His mission, he explained, wasn't to visit our time, but to go back to 1975 to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer. Titor claimed this specific early personal computer had a unique hidden feature allowing it to translate between old programming languages, an ability vital for debugging failing computer systems in his time. That chillingly specific detail about the IBM 5100 is what gave the Titor legend its power. Years later, IBM engineers confirmed that the 5100 did have this hidden emulation feature, a deeply obscure technical detail that was known only to a handful of original engineers back in 2000. How did some random guy on the internet know that? Titor posted prolifically for 4 months. He described his time machine, a C204 gravity distortion unit, which he said was installed in a 67 Corvette. He even posted grainy photos of the device and its schematics. He explained the physics of his travel, claiming the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics was correct. This was a clever narrative trick, as it meant his presence here had created a new timeline. So, any of his predictions that failed to come true could be explained away. Our timeline had simply diverged from his, and his predictions did fail. Big time. There was no Civil War in 2004 and no World War III in 2015. On March 24, 2001, John Titor announced his mission was complete, said he was returning to 2036, and was never heard from again. So, who was John Titor? The overwhelming consensus is that it was a brilliantly executed internet hoax. Investigations have pointed to a couple of possible candidates, but no one has ever officially taken credit. Despite being a hoax, the legend of John Titor is perhaps the most influential time travel myth of our time. It wasn't just a story. It was an interactive narrative that played out in real time. It was dark, not just for its apocalyptic prophecies, but for the fragile picture it painted of our future. A warning that our complex world might be one disaster away from sending a desperate soldier back in time to retrieve the ghosts from our old machines. Section 6. A Sound of Thunder. The Fictional Tyranny of Small Things. Now we move from legends that claim to be real to stories that are proudly fictional, yet their influence on our fear of time travel is even more profound. Our next entry isn't a movie or a novel, but a short story written in 1952 by the great Ray Bradbury. It's called A Sound of Thunder, and it gave us one of the most terrifying concepts in all of time travel, the butterfly effect. The story is set in a future where a company called Time Safari, Inc. takes wealthy clients back to the age of the dinosaurs to hunt a T-Rex. The company takes insane precautions to avoid changing the past. Hunters must stay on a floating metal path. They can only shoot a dinosaur that's already been pre-selected, one that was about to die from a falling tree anyway. The logic is simple. Change absolutely nothing. A nervous hunter named Eccles joins the safari. When the colossal T-Rex finally appears, its sheer terror breaks him. He panics, stepping off the path and onto the soft, prehistoric jungle floor. His guides are furious. They finish the hunt and return to their own time. When they step out of the time machine, everything seems normal at first, but then they notice subtle, awful changes. The air smells weird. The spelling on their own company's sign is different. Eccles looks down at the mud on his boots and finds it. A single, crushed butterfly. That one tiny act, the death of one butterfly millions of years ago, has cascaded through history, creating ripples that have completely rewritten the present. The story ends with the most chilling change of all. The recent presidential election, won by a moderate, has now been won by his fascistic opponent. The world has been plunged into a totalitarian future, all because one man stepped on a butterfly. The final sound of thunder isn't a dinosaur. It's the rifle shot as the guide executes Eccles for his catastrophic mistake. A sound of thunder is a masterpiece. Its horror lies in a simple, profound idea. Causality is a fragile chain, and we have no idea which links matter. It suggests even the smallest action could have devastating consequences, turning the past into a minefield of infinite, catastrophic possibilities. The butterfly effect has transcended fiction. It's the ultimate fear of unintended consequences, a warning that you aren't just changing events, you're gambling with reality itself. Section 7. Steins.gate, the psychological hell of a fixed point. Our final legend comes from modern Japanese storytelling, a visual novel and anime that takes the John Titor legend as inspiration and spirals it into one of the most brutal explorations of the psychological cost of time travel ever made. This is the story of Steins.gate. The story follows Rintaro Okabe, a self-proclaimed mad scientist who, with his friends, accidentally invents a time machine. It's not a fancy car. It's a microwave oven that can send text messages to the past. At first, it's a game. They send back winning lottery numbers and change minor events. But then, tragedy strikes. Okabe's childhood friend, Mayuri, is killed. In a panic, Okabe uses their invention to leap back in time to prevent her death. This is where Steins.gate becomes a special kind of hell. Okabe discovers that no matter what he does, he can't save her. If he stops her from being shot, she gets hit by a car. If he gets her out of the city, she dies in a train crash. He is forced to watch his friend die, over and over and over, in an endless loop of suffering. He learns the horrifying truth. Mayuri's death is a fixed point, an event the universe itself demands. The timeline has an inertia, a convergence, that will ensure she dies one way or another. To save her, he can't just make a small change. He has to fundamentally rewrite the past by undoing every single text message they ever sent, jumping to a completely different world line. But undoing those changes comes with its own agonizing price. To save one friend, he must sacrifice another. A brilliant neuroscientist named Kurisu Makise, a woman he has grown to love. He is trapped in a cruel, heartbreaking paradox. The horror of Steins.gate is deeply personal. It's not about the fear of changing the world, but the terror of being the only one who remembers. With every time leap, Okabe alone carries the trauma of the failed timelines, the weight of watching his friends die again and again, while they remain blissfully unaware. His sanity shreds. He becomes isolated and broken, a man haunted by ghosts only he can see. His ability to remember across timelines is both a gift and an unbearable curse. It's the curse of being a god. The power to change time isolates him completely, warning us that meddling with time doesn't just break the world. It breaks the person doing the meddling. It's a story about the ultimate loneliness of being a traveler lost between worlds, forced to carry infinite sorrows, all alone. From the ghostly gardens of Versailles to the psychological torment of a Japanese lab, these dark legends all share a common thread. They aren't just spooky stories. They're modern fables built around one timeless warning: do not meddle with what you don't understand. They speak to our deep anxiety about our choices and the seductive, terrifying fantasy of a second chance. They warn of hubris, the arrogance of thinking we can control the chaotic tapestry of cause and effect. They warn of paradox, of being erased from existence, or worse, being the only one left to remember what was lost. They warn that the road to fixing the past is paved with monstrous consequences. Whether it's a footstep on a prehistoric butterfly, a vortex in a garage, or a secret government project, the message is the same. Tampering with time is a gamble where the price of failure isn't just your own life, but reality itself. These tales are a chilling reminder that maybe some doors are meant to stay closed, and the past is best left as it is. A lesson, a memory, but never a destination. So, what do you think? If you had a time machine, would you use it? And which of these legends will be keeping you up tonight? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm always fascinated to hear what you think. And if you enjoyed this trip into the dark side of time, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more explorations into the world's greatest mysteries. Thanks for watching.